Hi, everyone. This is a very quickly thrown together little look at the workbook reports because I saw almost everybody posted about them this week already. So wanted to walk you through them before you do attempt any more with this week's assignment. So what are the workbook reports? The report section of your workbook are samples of actual clinical documentation. So this is what you are going to be looking at as a coder to determine what is the correct code or multiple codes that you will need to include in order to get reimbursement. So unfortunately, most of the time you are not going to get a simple 2-word diagnosis. There's going to be sentences and paragraphs of other information that you will need to sift through to determine what is the appropriate diagnosis. And then later we'll add in procedures and services. But right now we're just looking at those diagnoses. The national exam will have several questions that are written in this format. They're not crazy long. They're usually maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs, but it's still considerable amount of reading. So it's important that you feel comfortable with it and you can figure it out. You don't have to know what every single word means, but you can figure these out. So where are they and what am I looking for? This is probably the bigger concern because I feel like a lot of people felt kind of blindsided when a question just says report 22. Had no idea what that meant. So your workbook is going to direct you to a report, and then you're going to look that report up in the back of the book. It's in Appendix A. It's in like the 170s, around there, pages. So after all of the chapters. And then you're going to pick out the appropriate code from that documentation. Right now, like I said, we're only looking at the diagnosis. So the report might have a lot of information about procedures, services, patient history, evaluation, any of that could be in there because they're going to bring this report up later and you're going to look at it again. But right now, we're just looking for the diagnosis. So that is what you need to figure out from the documentation. Let me switch over to the document camera because it doesn't really make sense if we don't actually look at the reports. So we're going to look at number 60 and 62 from this week because those are the even numbers, obviously, so you don't have the answers to them already. And those will probably be in your homework. So I'm just giving you some answers to your homework questions, but that's okay because we're here to learn. We're not here to just challenge you endlessly, right? I'd rather you have the answer and feel confident in how we got it. Let me switch over real quick. Okay, so we are looking at chapter 7, and on the last page is usually where they are. Here's the report section, and it does say in Appendix A of the workbook, you will find a section titled Reports, and that has original reports. It's just physician documentation, patient documentation. So for number 60, it says look at report 36. So let's go look that up. And okay, so Appendix A is all the way here in the back, and we're looking for report 36. So we're in Appendix A. Okay, so report 36 is on page 184 of your workbook, right here at the bottom, and then it does go up into the top as well. There's a lot going on here, right? This is a lot to read, and that is probably really overwhelming if you've never seen documentation before. So what you want to look at here is the preoperative diagnoses and the postoperative diagnoses. Also in here is going to be the procedure that's performed, what did they do? And then it's going to have a description of the procedure that goes on to the next page. Yes, you'll want to read these to understand what's happening, especially once we get into doing the procedure codes. You're going to want to be able to read through all these and understand what's happening. But right now we are looking at the diagnoses, and luckily the way that they have this set up, they have the preoperative diagnoses and the postoperative diagnoses right next to each other. Sometimes they put the postoperative diagnoses at the end of the code of the note, but in this format they do not. So that's more convenient for us. So when we are looking at the diagnoses, we want the postoperative diagnoses generally, unless they ask for preoperative, but they usually are not going to, because that's what we're coding as. That's what the final diagnoses are. Now you're going to see here that the preoperative diagnoses are a little tricky. It looks like there's two, correct? So the first one is express desire of the operating gynecologist to insert indwelling uteral stents for ease of dissection of the anticipated enlarged adherent uterus. So that is complicated. What would you even look up there? But if we can dissect that a little bit, it's saying an express desire. So this is the patient has asked for something to be done. We don't have any diagnoses for asking for something to be done. But if we're reading through it, it looks like they want these stents put in because there's going to be another procedure later on. Okay. So they're asking for something that's going to make this other procedure easier. So what this really isn't a medical diagnosis. It is, but it is further explanation for why they're performing this procedure, because it looks like they're going to do a dissection of the anticipated enlarged adherent uterus. So they're anticipating another procedure, and so that would justify the placing of these catheters or stents. So why are they going to do this upcoming procedure, is because of this second one. So the gynecologist has diagnosed it. So the diagnosis is pelvic endometriosis. So that's what we're going to look up. Yes, this part is important. It provides more context, but there's not a code in your ICD-10 that's going to meet this criteria here. So we only really code for conditions, right? Conditions or screenings or things like that, counseling. So we've not seen any type of diagnosis codes for expressing a desire for something, but this does provide some context for us. So we want to do pelvic endometriosis. So that's going to be the diagnosis that we're going to look up, okay? And since we're here, let's go ahead and look it up for you. So we're going to pull out our ICD-10 and we'll go to the alpha, and the main term is going to be that endometriosis. Why? Pelvic is the type of endometriosis. So let's look up in the E section. Okay, it looks like on page 240 is where endometriosis. And let's check through the subterms and see if there's pelvic. And it does have pelvic peritoneum. Let's look that up in 80.3. And let's see if there's anything else that we need to find. Okay, so on page 1112 is N80.3, endometriosis of pelvic peritoneum. So that is what we're going to use. It doesn't look like there are any other requirements or additional characters needed. So we're just going to stick with N80.3. And let's go check out the other report. Like I said, that one only had the one diagnosis. So let's go back to chapter 7. And number 62 tells us to look at report 94. Okay. And it's walking oxygen desaturation study. Man, that's a mouthful. Entrance. So this looks like a patient has gone to a study for their oxygen saturation or desaturation. So they've already seen the doctor. The doctor wants them to get some kind of test or study done. Okay. So the entrance diagnosis is dyspnea. And if we want to read through this, he gave a board rating. What does that mean? Usually, I don't know a lot about this, but usually when patients go for some kind of pain study or something that's going to relate to them getting tired or worked up, they're going to point to a rating on a board on the wall usually, or on a clipboard or something like that, that's going to say, I'm at a level 1, I'm at a level 2. So this patient said he was at a level 5 at the end, but he was at a 3 at the beginning. So he had some discomfort. He was able to walk for 6 minutes without stopping. He had wheezing and coughing. He had relatively poor exercise tolerance, and the stats never dropped below 90%. The patient does not need oxygen therapy with this form of exercise. So it's the point of the study was to find out, did he need oxygen therapy? And they said, no, you don't. But what are we looking for? Are we looking for a service code or a procedure code? No, we are looking for that diagnosis code, which is going to be right there. Yeah. So we're going to want to look that up. They don't give us any other diagnosis or anything else within the ICD-10 that we'd want to look up, right? So dyspnea, let's go look that up in your ICD-10. The alpha. And remember the prefix. We talked a little bit in the last video about learning prefixes and suffixes if it's been a while since you've done medical terminology, but that DYS is going to mean dysfunction of some kind, something's not working, and the apnea is going to be something related to breathing. So dyspnea is right here on page 231 at the top. And R0600, we don't have any other specifications, like shortness of breath sounds like it would probably fall in there, but that wasn't specified in the documentation. So we're just going to do the dyspnea. If it said dyspnea / shortness of breath, yeah, I'm inherent, but that wasn't included in the documentation. So let's go to R06.00 and see if there's anything else we need to know. R06. Here we have R06.0 is dyspnea. R06.00 is dyspnea unspecified, and that's on page 1199. So I'm going to highlight that. And it doesn't look like any additional characters are needed. There's no other symbols, no other requirements here. So we are good to go with that one. So that's what we're going to put down as RO 6.00. Let's check back with the PowerPoint and see if we are correct. Okay, yes, it looks like we got both of those correct. Endometriosis of pelvis in 80.3 and dyspnea RO 6.00. So really you're doing the same thing that you've done all along. We're just having to find the question a little bit with those reports. You have to figure out what is it that this report is asking me to find? Where is the diagnosis that I'm looking up? So I would definitely, it's definitely going to take practice. I know one of those questions for this week is about pregnancy, I believe, or delivery, and those are really complicated. So make sure you're reviewing your guidelines and figuring out exactly what you need to do. But luckily you have the answers already, so you can check yourself. And now you've got the answers to the other ones, the even number ones as well. So hopefully you can feel even more confident going into that. Continue to post questions if you have like specific issues with the reports. I just saw a lot of more general, like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't understand it. But if you have like an example that you're really struggling with and I can walk through that, that will help me make you even more specific videos. So thank you all, and I hope this was helpful.